The news broke like a thunderclap across a tense nation, a seismic event that reverberated through every sector of society. The implications were immediately clear, a major challenge to the established order. On a sweltering July morning, the kind that makes Washington, D.C. feel like a pressure cooker, the Supreme Court, in a landmark ruling, blocked former President Donald Trump's sweeping new tariff proposal. The decision was delivered with the weight of constitutional authority, a moment etched in legal history. This wasn't just a legal setback, a mere procedural hurdle. It was a direct challenge to his America First economic philosophy, the cornerstone of his political agenda, and a promise made to his devoted followers. The judiciary drew a firm line in the sand against executive power, asserting its role as a check and balance in a system designed to prevent any single branch from becoming too dominant. The reaction from Mar-a-Lago was immediate and explosive, a volcanic eruption of outrage and defiance. Trump unleashed a digital firestorm, a barrage of tweets and posts that ignited social media and dominated news cycles, calling the decision a disgrace and labeling the justices traitors to American workers, accusing them of betraying the very people they were sworn to protect. This was not the language of acceptance, not a concession to the rule of law, but the fury of a leader who saw the ruling as a personal and political attack, a deliberate attempt to undermine his authority and legacy. He framed it as an assault on the sovereignty of the United States and the will of his supporters, painting a picture of a nation under siege from within. Washington, D.C. buzzed with tension as news anchors scrambled to explain the magnitude of the decision, dissecting every angle and speculating on the potential fallout. The Supreme Court had intervened in a high-stakes economic battle, a clash of ideologies with profound consequences for the nation's future. Pitting presidential authority against constitutional limits, a fundamental question at the heart of American democracy. The ruling instantly became the nation's biggest story, dominating headlines and sparking intense debate across the political spectrum, threatening to spark a political crisis, a constitutional showdown that could reshape the balance of power in Washington. Across the country, Americans watched the drama unfold in real time, emotions running high as they grappled with the implications of this historic decision. Some celebrated a check on what they saw as reckless policy, a victory for the rule of law and a safeguard against executive overreach. Others felt deep anger and injustice, believing that the court had overstepped its bounds and betrayed the will of the people. For Trump's base, it was proof of a deep state conspiracy thwarting their champion, a confirmation of their long-held suspicions about the forces arrayed against them. The decision didn't just strike down a tariff plan, it struck at the heart of a political movement. It exposed the raw nerves of a deeply divided nation, laying bare the fault lines that threatened to tear the country apart. The battle lines were drawn, the stage was set for a protracted and bitter struggle, and the country braced for what would come next, an uncertain future filled with political turmoil and the potential for further division. To understand the shockwave that reverberated across the nation, you must first understand the plan itself, the American Economic Sovereignty Act. It was a proposal unlike any other in recent history. Trump's American Economic Sovereignty Act called for a universal 25% tariff on all imports, without exception. A bold, some would say reckless, controversial move that sent ripples through the global economy. The goal forced companies, both domestic and international, to bring manufacturing back to American soil, incentivizing local production. No matter the potential cost to global relations or the disruption it might cause to established trade agreements, supporters saw it as necessary medicine, a jolt to the system, for an economy they believed had been hollowed out by decades of unfair trade practices. They believed it would restore American manufacturing to its former glory, fostering economic independence and creating jobs. Critics, however, warned of a devastating global trade war, with retaliatory tariffs and economic instability on a scale not seen in generations, and skyrocketing prices for everyday consumers, impacting household budgets and potentially triggering a recession. Business groups lobbied fiercely against it, calling it economic self-sabotage that would cripple American competitiveness. The plan became a potent symbol of the nation's deep divisions, exposing fault lines in American society, a litmus test for America's role in the world and its commitment to free trade versus protectionism. Should the country insulate itself behind tariff walls or embrace global commerce and international cooperation? The debate raged everywhere, dominating headlines and fueling passionate arguments. From cable news, where talking heads dissected every angle of the proposal, to dinner tables, where families argued about the potential consequences for their livelihoods. The Supreme Court wasn't just ruling on tariffs and trade law, it was stepping directly into the heart of a fierce national argument, a battle over the very soul of the American economy. The stakes couldn't have been higher, with the future of American trade hanging in the balance. The Supreme Court's ruling was complex, but its message was clear. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the majority found Trump's tariff plan a significant overreach of executive authority. The power to regulate commerce, they said, belongs to Congress, not the president. The justices distinguished between targeted tariffs for security and a universal tariff that re-engineers the economy. Allowing a president to impose such a measure would erase the separation of powers. The dissent argued that Congress had long delegated broad trade authority to the president. They warned the decision would hamstring future presidents in responding to economic threats. Ultimately, one swing vote decided the case, mirroring the nation's deep divisions. The ruling wasn't about the merits of tariffs, but about who gets to decide, Congress or the president. The hot potato of trade policy was tossed back to a polarized legislature. Within minutes, Trump's social media erupted. No measured response, just a barrage of posts. The Supreme Court has betrayed the American people. He targeted the Chief Justice, posted memes and shared rally videos, painting the court as enemies of the state. Trump bypassed traditional media, speaking directly to his followers and framing himself as a victim of a corrupt elite. He called for protests, announced a Save America rally, and used the outrage to fundraise. The message: the system is rigged and only he can fix it. His digital onslaught dominated the news cycle, energizing supporters and horrifying critics. Trump turned legal defeat into a rallying cry, proving his voice could still shake American politics. The narrative was set, the fight was far from over. The Supreme Court's decision sent shockwaves through the markets. Wall Street surged, relieved to avoid a trade war. Stocks in import-heavy sectors soared, and global leaders welcomed the decision as a win for stability. In the U.S., Democrats hailed the ruling as a triumph for the Constitution. Trump's allies in Congress condemned the court, echoing his outrage. On Main Street, reactions were mixed. Port cities and small businesses celebrated relief from rising costs. But in manufacturing towns, the decision felt like a betrayal. For some, it was a victory for Wall Street over workers. The ruling didn't heal economic anxieties. It deepened them. America's divide was on full display. The Supreme Court's decision on the tariffs exposed the nation's deep divisions, revealing just how polarized the country had become on issues of trade, economic policy, and the role of the executive branch. Supporters of the tariff plan, many of whom had rallied behind promises of bringing back American manufacturing, saw the ruling as a betrayal of the working class, a setback to their hopes for economic revival in struggling industrial areas. Frank, a former steelworker in Ohio, said, "Trump was the first to fight for us. Now judges who never worried about a factory closing sitting comfortably in their chambers say he can't." The sentiment reflected a deep sense of abandonment. Conservative media called the decision, framing it in stark terms, a political attack by globalists, an attempt to undermine the will of the people and the president's agenda. For them, the court was part of a war, a battleground in the larger culture war, against their movement, a direct assault on their values and their vision for the country. On the other side, critics of the tariff plan felt relief, a sense that a dangerous precedent had been avoided. A small business owner in California said, "A 25% tariff would have put me out of business. This decision means I can keep my doors open." It was a victory for Main Street, they believed. Many saw the ruling as a victory, not just for individual businesses, for the rule of law and checks and balances, essential components of American democracy. A law professor stated, "The Supreme Court's decision reaffirms that a president is not a king." It was a crucial limitation on executive power. For this half of the country, the court's action was a courageous act of judicial responsibility, a vital defense of constitutional principles. The ruling was not just about tariffs. It was about the strength of American institutions, their ability to withstand political pressure and uphold the law. Both sides saw the decision, through their own distinct lenses, as a defining moment, a turning point in the ongoing struggle for the soul of the nation. The nation's fractures were laid bare, revealing the deep fault lines that ran through American society. The debate over America's future had only intensified, fueled by the court's decision and the passions it ignited on both sides. Legal scholars called the ruling a landmark in the battle over presidential power. For decades, Congress had ceded trade authority to the White House. Now the court pushed back. The decision set a new limit. Sweeping tariffs require congressional approval. Economists warned that while a crisis was averted, uncertainty now loomed. Trade policy was back in the hands of a gridlocked Congress. Political scientists noted the risk to the court's legitimacy as Trump's attacks fueled distrust. The ruling didn't outlaw tariffs but raised the bar for their use. Any future large-scale tariff would need explicit approval from Congress. This neutered a key tool in the populist nationalist playbook. The court had fundamentally changed the rules for future presidents. The balance of power had shifted. With the Supreme Court's decision, the nation stands at a crossroads. Trump is already using the ruling to energize his base, framing himself as a martyr. Congress now faces the challenge of legislating on tariffs, an uphill battle in a divided chamber. Pro-Trump Republicans may push for new tariff laws, but fierce opposition and gridlock are likely. Markets celebrated stability, but corporations now face new political risks. America's reputation as a reliable trading partner is in question. Allies and adversaries are watching to see if the U.S. can forge a coherent trade policy. The real question, will this deepen polarization, or spark a real debate about economic pain? The Supreme Court has ruled on the law, but the final verdict will come from the American people. The battle for the soul of the American economy is just beginning.